This is a brief overview of a very crucial aspect of emergency response, and one that is really far too often overlooked. And that's infant and young child feeding. And this particular presentation is focusing on breastfeeding. Breastfeeding saves lives. I smile only because some people think that that's an exaggerated statement, but actually it isn't. Study after study shows us that non-breastfed infants, formula-fed infants, are far more likely to be sick, to die in certain situations than non-breastfed infants. This is even in non-emergency situations. And of course, in emergency situations, that the risks are greatly, greatly increased. There are several reasons for this, but some of the main reasons or the main dangers are that there is a very unreliable supply of formula. Mothers have to get formula from organizations who are doing distribution. It's very erratic. They are getting different brands all the time, which is not good for an infant. Formula comes in different levels. They may be getting a level of formula that is inappropriate for the infant. The supply and demand is very unsteady, unreliable. And the ability to prepare the formula properly is usually not good in emergency situations. You have to be able to clean thoroughly the bottles and the other equipment that's needed. You have to be able to sterilize the bottles for safe and hygienic feeding. You need to have clean boiled water to mix with the powdered formula. Mothers often don't have enough formula, as we said before, because it's an unreliable supply, so they dilute it. The infant doesn't get all the formula that's needed. And because, again, they have an unreliable supply, they tend to make up one feed and then keep it for hours or for days and feed the infant with it later. Formula, once it's prepared, starts to go bad in about an hour. And in normal situations, formula should be discarded after the infant is fed and whatever is left is thrown out. But in emergency situations, mothers often don't have that luxury, you may say, because they don't know where they're going to get more. So the infant is fed formula which is not healthy, not hygienic. And so this greatly, greatly increases the incidences of gastrointestinal, respiratory, and immune system disturbances. And really, please notice that. Start observing it, because once you start observing it, you will see the definite correlation. You will see it. But we're not only talking about nutrition here. We're talking also about child protection. Infants, and the smaller they are, the greater this is true, what I'm going to say. Infants' systems, particularly their neurological systems, are nowhere near developed enough to be able to deal with stress, to filter out the traumatic incident, the stress from the traumatic incidents. What they need is to be close to the mother or to a caregiver. Physically close, physical proximity is the best protection against trauma for the infant. Now, breastfeeding happens to be one of the closest situations that a mother and an infant can be in. So breastfeeding is not only nutritionally sound, but it also gives that sense of protection. It's very important to realize that when infants are in utero, when the mother is pregnant, the infant has grown through the mother's body. And when infants are born, particularly in the first 3 crucial months, but then the 6 months, 1 year, and really even up to 2 years, they are living through the physiological responses of the mother's body. It is the closeness to the mother that is able to help the infant to stay in balance, to become, again, calmer when stressed, to deal with all of the external input that the infant is not physiologically prepared to deal with. So the closeness to the mother's body is a huge protection, trauma protection, infant protection in times of emergency response. There's something else that really helps, and that is that when the mother is breastfeeding, she is, and the baby both, are secreting huge amounts of certain hormones. And these hormones are the hormones that are antagonistic to stress hormones. Cortisol, the main stress hormone, cannot exist in high amounts in somebody's system when the hormones that are secreted during breastfeeding are present in high amounts. That means that when the mother is breastfeeding, it is physiologically impossible for cortisol and some of the other stress hormones to be high. And so breastfeeding doesn't necessarily get rid of all of her stress in such a situation, but it helps her to be clearer in her responses, clearer in her thinking. It gives her a measure of calmness, is the best word to use. And also the same thing happens with the baby. So on a physiological level, the hormones that are secreted during breastfeeding are very, very advantageous to both mother and baby, and also, again, in terms of helping them to deal with the trauma. Something that I want to point out, which is not about breastfeeding, but I just want to say it to you, and that is that the distribution of baby carriers in an emergency situation is an excellent infant protection measure. Wraps are very good, slings are very good, but actually any type of baby carrier helps the baby to be close to the mother, right at the heart level. And it's not by accident that adults tend to hold children, infants, up here by the heart. There's a physiological vibrational frequency that is transmitted between mother and infant, and baby carriers help this very, very much. So if you have any chance to distribute baby carriers, please do. That's just a side note to the rest of the presentation. I want to briefly say that some of the prevalent myths about breastfeeding, which are not only heard in disaster situations, they are heard from so many mothers everywhere around the world. But in disaster situations, they tend to be stronger. Mothers will say, I don't have enough milk. My milk isn't good quality because I'm stressed. I'm not eating well. I'm traumatized. And I have heard from so many people that infants need to have supplementation with a formula during times of crises. Mothers will say, well, when we had to leave our home, we had all of this happening, and I stopped breastfeeding, or I cut down on breastfeeding, and so now I need formula. All of these are not true. Please really keep this in mind. Mothers many, many times just need support. They need to hear from somebody that their bodies are fully made to have milk for their infants, no matter what the situation is. There is a very amazing fact, and that fact is that when mothers are dying, when they are starving, for example, in a famine, literally starving, and their bodies are shutting down, the last of the liquid secretions to shut down is breast milk. That means a mother may not have any urine, other liquids such as perspiration, saliva, tears, but she will still produce breast milk if a baby is sucking at her breast and needing the milk. This is an example of the unparalleled, very powerful synchronization between mothers' and infants' bodies. It is truly extraordinary and does not happen in this kind of close, coordinated cooperation, I like to call it, between human beings at any other time in human growth and development. So this aspect we really need to remember and remind mothers of. Tell them, yes, they can. Now, they can breastfeed. Now, one thing is that the stress does not stop the mother from producing milk. However, it can stop what is called a letdown reflex. And that means that the mother may have the milk, but because of stress, the milk isn't coming out to the baby. But she just needs, again, the support to hold the infant close, to focus on the baby skin to skin, if possible. These measures increase the flow of the hormones needed for breastfeeding, for the release of the breast milk. So she is capable of it, and the anxiety and the stress can stop the letdown, but it does not stop the production of milk. She needs your care, your comfort, your sitting with her and reminding her that she was made to be able to have this baby grow through her body and through the milk that she produces. So what you can do, this is very brief. There's so much more we could go into, obviously, but as an orientation for you, I'm going to give you a few key points that you can do. One, which is very obvious, is that you can encourage breastfeeding in all possible situations. When a mother has cut down on breastfeeding up until 6 months after birth, she can relactate. She can get the milk back. Now, sometimes that requires quite a bit of support, lactation support. Sometimes it requires, and what a lactation consultant would tell her is, the main thing is to have the baby suck at the breast. The more that the sucking reflex is present, the more the mother's body will produce milk. So keep the baby at the breast as much as possible. Have her be as calm and relaxed as possible. And her body will start to produce more milk. So encourage the mothers not to take the formula, but to increase or continue breastfeeding. Lactation consultants should be one of the major players in any emergency response team, anywhere in the world at any time. But rarely is that the case. And so lactation consultants need to be sourced in times of emergencies. Maybe from local people. There's an organization called La Leche League, which is an amazing, wonderful international breastfeeding association. And La Leche League exists all over the world. You may be able to find local people. International volunteers sometimes are ready to come. Online consultations. We at Amritel Greece are ready to do online consultations. We have a Ukrainian interpreter. Online, of course, is not as good as in person, but it works. We started during COVID lockdown with online consultations, and we understand that when you can't be there in person, this works. Now, Didi told me also that Save the Children is there and has a mother-baby area. So they may have lactation consultants. If you have lactation consultants to give support, please use them. Try to find them. I will also list some resources at the end where you can learn more yourself about some basics, but many times, of course, it needs real specialists. The third thing is that you can help mothers to prepare the formula safely and hygienically when they really need to. When an infant has not been breastfed at all, or the infant is over 6 months old and the mother cannot relactate, then of course, infant formula saves lives as well. But we need to help them. It's a very good thing, and I think it might be my next point. Oh, it isn't. It's the last point, but I will just briefly say it now. And that is that it's a good idea to set up some kind of mother-baby areas or infant feeding areas, if that is possible to do. It can be one small space, a tent is fine, someplace where the mothers can come and they can breastfeed. They can find themselves in a little bit of a quiet place with other mothers who are also feeding their infants. There you can have the setup, you can get sterilizers, and you can have ways that the mothers can thoroughly clean and wash the bottles. And when you have lactation consultants, the lactation consultants will help them to understand how much formula they need. I don't know how much Ukrainian mothers breastfeed. I have heard that they breastfeed a lot, but when I looked up the statistics online, I didn't find that to be true. So you're there in the ground. I don't know, I can't see it, but if they're breastfeeding and they have somehow they need to prepare formula, or they have been, they often don't really know how to do it well. So they need help. They need a safe, hygienic place in order to prepare the formula every time it's needed. And what we're talking about here is small infants, newborns, small infants in the first month. They need to be fed every 3 hours or more during the day and night. So we're talking about someplace that is really accessible for mothers if they are not able to breastfeed for whatever reason. Of course, as the infant grows older, the amount of formula decreases that's needed is less and less. It's actually the optimum is that infants should be exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months of life. And that means no water, no tea, no juice, not any other liquid is needed, even in the hottest of weather, which you are not there now in this particular situation. But infants at any time do not need any liquid except breast milk. And as they grow, after 6 months, they should be fed solid food. And then the amount of breast milk decreases gradually. Up until about 2 years, the WHO and most of the international breastfeeding associations recommend that an infant is actually fed up until 2 years, breast milk, that is, together with food after 6 months. So the fourth point, which I have already shown here, is to please try to discourage the random distribution of formula. Now, this happens by well-intentioned aid workers who very often go to a lot of trouble to try to collect formula, but then it's distributed to any mother who has a small infant. And this is very dangerous. In times of disaster, when people have nothing, they have left everything behind, they have a tendency, as we all would do in that situation, to take what is given to them. And when someone is offering formula, breastfeeding mothers are likely to take it. And then, of course, they're going to want to use it. So ideally, lactation consultants should be there on the ground assessing the mothers, helping them to increase breastfeeding, but assessing them when they do actually need to formula feed. And then those mothers should be given formula, and only those mothers. So please, with the other aid agencies, the organizations that are there, please talk to them and try to discourage the random distribution to any and all mothers with infants of formula. This can really do a lot more harm than good. And the fifth one, which I actually talked about under number 3, is to help to create these spaces. Now, one thing that is very important in a mother-baby area or an infant feeding space is that the breastfeeding mothers have a space and the bottle feeding mothers have a space. And that again is so that mothers who are breastfeeding are not somehow encouraged to formula feed because they see it and it's there, and the formula feeding mothers are being given the formula. Ideally, in a situation like that, the breastfeeding mothers would be given some supplemental food or liquid. Obviously, a breastfeeding mother needs good nutrition, but her body will produce milk no matter what her nutritional status is. But she needs a lot of liquids. Breastfeeding mothers need to drink water. They need to drink a lot. So if you can, find the breastfeeding mothers and just bring them more water. Even that would be a great help. And of course, if you have the space, then give them more liquids in that space because they really need that. This is a very, very brief list of resources. WHO has a very clear and good guide for mothers in emergencies. I'm not sure the languages that it's in, but it's very clear, right to the point. You can find that online. ENN is the Emergency Nutrition Network. There is a part of ENN is the core group on infant feeding. It's called IFE. They have a lot of resources. They have resources in Romanian. I didn't notice any in Ukrainian, but they have in Romanian. So you can really, if you're interested in this, you can really self-teach. You can learn quite a bit on your own. Ideally, we will come from Amartel at some point, and we would be happy to do a little bit more thorough training. But at this point, these are resources that you can use to learn more yourself, also to have some things to give to the mothers if you want. In emergency situations, giving mothers handouts is not often the best. It's far better just for you to sit with them, visit them regularly, periodically, and give them the support that way. Well, there's so much more actually to be said, but this is it briefly. We in Amartel Greece are ready, as I said, to be online. You can get our number from Amartel Romania. And we are committed to mothers and infants. So we really thank you. You are who are there as emergency responders. But of course, even more than that, the mothers and babies will thank you. And the babies, even more in the long run. What happens to infants will stay with them their whole life. And infants in trauma situations really need a lot of attention. I hope you will be able to give it to them. Feel free to contact us through Amartel Romania for any questions, comments. Yeah, thank you for being there.